the first moment that it happened, we've had tremendous support from the firefighters, the police officers, the people who work in the buildings, the people who work for Verizon.
Your Verizon folks were on the front lines that day, and they were there literally on the front lines on September 11th, holding back fire, smoke, water, keeping us informed about what was going on so we could make informed decisions about how best to support the Secretary.
People had told me Tuesday night when I was down here that we would be standing here, that the phones would be working, that the New York Stock Exchange, the Mercantile Exchange, and so much in downtown Manhattan would be open today. I would have said it would take a miracle. It hasn't taken a miracle. It's taken a Herculean effort by thousands of people, including all of the people at Verizon. And, you know, when the stock exchanges and the Mercantile Exchange opened, I think it sent a strong message to the world that for all the evil and catastrophic consequences of this, we're back a lot sooner than anybody thought, and we're going to continue to be the financial center of the world, thanks to people like this, thanks to leadership like this.
It is a defining moment for this company, where the whole world all of a sudden recognized Verizon for the company. I always knew we were, but now I think the outside world appreciates it even more. So it certainly was the defining moment for our company.
There's nothing like it when the rest of the world says, gee, job well done, we appreciate what you've done. And that's really what our people should come away from with this, is the recognition that they did the right thing, didn't have to be told. They supported each other in a way that was extraordinary, and the world noticed. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that, I think.
I was in my office on the 32nd floor here at 1095.
I was in a mid-rise elevator machine room, and I was doing my timesheets.
I was actually walking down Warren Street, which is 5 blocks or less from the World Trade Towers.
I was in my office. I was doing expense budgets.
I was here at the headquarters building in a meeting that started at 8 o'clock. The meeting was almost ready to end.
The plane that I did not see but heard flew right over my head and right into the trade towers.
Someone screamed in the office, and that's when I looked up to the window.
I was heading down Fifth Avenue, and the cab driver actually saw smoke coming out of the World Trade Center and stepped on his brakes.
1 minute after the plane hit the North Tower, I was coming up out of the subway station about 250 feet away from the North Tower.
So I ran out of the office and went on to Washington Street side of the building and looked up.
And as I looked up at the North Tower, all we could see was just a very gaping hole and the flames and smoke that were shooting up into the air. And the people just stood there in utter amazement, looking to figure out what did occur and what was going to happen. We soon found out what was going to happen next.
I was looking out the window again, and I saw the second aircraft approach the South Tower.
The plane hit from the opposite side of the building, so I could not see the second plane hit. But I could see the explosion as the debris came down on top of all of us.
You found yourself trying to find a safe place, trying to comprehend what was actually going on around you, trying to understand the context, because you're there in a place that you really don't know what's happening.
It was right at that instant, as soon as we saw that plane hit, that we made the decision to start to move people down in the building.
We immediately opened up our Emergency Operations Center, which we call the EOC.
We went into a condition red situation whereby we drastically tightened up the security around most of our facilities, particularly our critical facilities.
The mood was essentially about our people, what's happened to our people which were there.
Where are they? Can we account for them? Is everybody safe?
We had 400 or 500 employees in the towers. We had another 1,700 plus at West Street.
We had to get our people out of there.
And I could see people waving out the window with rags and stuff, you know, for help, you could tell they're not going to make it because you can see there's fire below them and they're trapped above it,
the police and fire people that were there did just a fantastic job of encouraging everybody in as orderly manner as possible to move away while they went into the buildings to put out the fire and to help with the evacuation of all of the people who were still there.
And as you stood there watching the fire, you were hoping that they didn't just get out and stand around the mall, but that they got far enough away. Because there were several people around who were saying, you know, that building can't stand that kind of break in its infrastructure.
There had been conversation in the call center about the 2 planes that had crashed into the Trade Center. As I proceeded out of my office into the call center, I was stopped by a representative. She told me she had a gentleman on the line and his plane was being hijacked. When I took the call over, I introduced myself to the gentleman and I asked him his name and he told me Todd Beamer.
She then went into what she's trained to do, which is to get as much information as possible from the passenger in terms of what the situation was, what the flight number was, where they were going, how many people were involved, how many people were on the aircraft, if anybody was hurt.
I was just doing my job. Same thing I would do today or tomorrow if I had to do it again.
At the same time that Lisa was talking to Todd, our operations center was online with the FBI.
For me, it was a very easy thing to do, which was listen to what she was saying and then ask a few questions. I didn't have to ask a whole lot. They inherently, or for some reason, maybe through the training from GT Airphone, knew what we needed to hear.
He told me there were 3 people that had taken over the plane. 2 had knives, and they had locked themselves into the cockpit. 1 had a bomb.
Lisa did just a magnificent job of trying to keep him calm and reassuring him that she would, in fact, keep the promise that he had asked of her, which was to contact his family.
I told him I would relay a message if I had to, but we still had hope that they would be able to land the plane safely.
I immediately called my mom, and she was telling me that, you know, maybe you guys might want to get out of there. That is the Pentagon, and something might happen there. And I'm going, nothing ever happens here at the Pentagon. It's the Pentagon. No one ever comes and bothers it. They know what it is. I hung up the phone. 10 minutes later, boom, our lives changed.
I'd stepped into a hallway, which was totally vacant, and within moments, 2 people appeared screaming that one had said, "Did you feel that?" And the other said it was a bomb.
Then when we exited the building, we actually came out near where the crash site was, and you could just feel the heat and the flames and everything from the plane coming at you from there.
Had the plane come over 50 to 100 feet in the other direction, I might not be here doing this interview with you.
It's not generally known, but Verizon has 40 to 45 people, employees, that are permanently assigned to the Pentagon. Our job is to run their voice switch network all over with, I think there's 25 or 26,000 telephones in the Pentagon. It's all run off a switch, which we're paid to operate and maintain.
When I learned that the Pentagon was struck, I was very concerned, because clearly the 2 most critical networks that we have for our country are our 911 network and our nation's defense networks. I knew this was big.
But our priority was to get all of the folks out of the Pentagon and frankly out of the government installations that we work in on a daily basis. I have people at the White House, at Senate, different military locations in different spots in the United States, and we didn't know where the next plane was going to hit because we knew something was in the air.
I wanted to find out how we could get coordinated, assess the damage that we had, and mobilize all of our resources so that we could respond, because people were depending upon us.
Well, first and foremost, on the 11th, we wanted to make sure that people got evacuated from the area as safely and quickly as possible.
My immediate reaction was to find out how my people were doing down in West Street and to get them out of the West Street building.
We heard an announcement on the PA system saying that, you know, everybody evacuate the building. I am one of the persons I have to stay. I cannot evacuate the building, but I have to go up and see what's going on.
There was at one point that they were evacuating Seabank, someone got stuck in the elevator, and if I wasn't up there and didn't stay there, if they didn't keep me there, they might have not made it out, you know.
As I was at the Brooklyn Bridge, the #1 tower fell in front of me. It was just total destruction and chaos. People running, screaming, praying.
All we knew was that there was a very loud noise, the earth shook, and as we looked out the glass doors, what had been a rather blue sky turned black. But to be honest, for the few of us who were in the lobby at that point in time, we didn't know what had happened.
We realized at that point we had to move out of the building, not knowing what else was going on.
At which time I said, Dave, give me 10 more minutes. We just want to check the building, me and my guys, one more time, make sure everything's okay.
He said he had to make a phone call. He said, you can leave if you want. I said, no, we'll stay with you until the end, George.
A few of them were getting together and they were thinking about jumping the guy with the bomb to try to take the plane back over. And I told them we still had hope.
The way the passengers acted, what they did, what they prevented, you got to just be happy that they were aware because of other phone calls of what the situation was. If there was no way to talk, those passengers probably would have just sat there and said, well, let's wait for this plane to land and hope they give up. So looking back, there's really nothing you could do more than what was done.
He asked me, would I say the Lord's Prayer with him? I told him I would. We recited the Lord's Prayer together. And after that, he told me he's going to have to go out on his faith because at this point, he didn't think he had much of a choice.
In situations like this, you hope you have someone like Lisa.
She just showed that she's a caring, compassionate human being, and at a time of great stress, she came through with flying colors.
At the crash site itself, with all the various agencies out there and the trailers that the wireless carriers bought in, they needed high-speed DS1 lines. The media needed some DS1 lines, as well as the FBI and ATF, and we provided all those.
Lennon and myself went back to the basement real quick, making sure that certain equipment, emergency equipment was on.
And George was actually in his office.
And while I'm on the phone, I feel a rumble.
And I said to Joe, because it's getting so loud, I said, Joe, we better get the hell out of here.
As all of these things were happening, you can imagine this building rocking and rolling. And Norris's thought process was that if he didn't shut down the environmental systems, the air handling systems would just suck all that dust and contamination into the building. And so he was down in the basement in the dark, shutting these things out while the world's falling down around him.
At the time we got downstairs and we began to shut everything down, we heard a loud sound. Bam! At that point, we said, let's go. Then the building began to shake.
I thought we were going to die, just laying on the floor, you know, you think that's it right there, you know. It's just...
Stuff falling through the building. It hit me in the head. My ceiling had collapsed. The walls caved in. I got under my desk.
After the rumble stopped, the dust and the smoke was so bad we couldn't see. I got my mag light on and I asked, is anybody around? And I heard my area manager, George, says, I'm down here.
My guys knew I was in the building and in my office, so they came to get me. I couldn't see them.
And so I went down to him with my light, and we teamed up, and then we found our way to the back dock, and just as we got there, Lenny, Rock, and Norris came up.
When we got here, George Familari, the elevator mechanic, was waiting for us. At that point, we opened the door, and it was just a cloud of darkness.
It was
like midnight without no moon. It was just pitch black out, you know. It was just, there was fire in the street, and that's the only that really helped you see a lot. And we just started trotting along out of the core of that dust cloud, you know.
Three hours later, we heard that there was a big flooding going on West Street. So George Familari, myself, and Leonard Rock, we came back.
And we get to the building, the fire department, we identify who we are, and they allow us in. Probably wasn't one of the smarter things to do, but we went in.
I mean, to go back into a building that is in the midst of a terror attack and nobody really knew what was going on and nobody really knew what was going to happen around them. And after the buildings fell down, the initial buildings, and knowing a building was on fire within 50 feet of our building, to want to go back and do certain things to protect the building. These are things that people can't comprehend, and you wonder why people did this, but they did it because they're professionals and they knew that, every little thing that they went in to do actually helped us.
Saved the company and customers weeks of work in restoration, and was literally in the building with water pouring in with 2x4s, smacking switches down in case they were electrified with wood.
I think had he not done that, we may not have ever gotten a lot of that equipment back.
By 2 o'clock in the afternoon, we were told by the fire department to shut down our emergency diesel generators. At that time, Larry Babbio said to me, we can't have that. We're going to lose power in the building. If we lose power in the building, they will lose power to, they'll lose telephone service in most of lower Manhattan. So he asked me to set up a meeting with the mayor.
And we felt it was important to try and provide service as long as possible. And that was the goal.
We went with the mayor's convoy then down to One Police Plaza. And of course, lower Manhattan then was just covered with this gray kind of dusty rain. And we briefed the mayor again on the consequences, and we said we wanted to get over to our building at 140 West Street to make an on-site observation. And the mayor told us at that time that it was likely that 7 World Trade Center was going to collapse.
We were walking up the street, approaching 140 West Street, when you started to hear the firemen holler, saying, it's going, it's going. And then when you start to see all the firemen run at you, I think at that time the best thing to do is run in the same direction that they're running.
It was just a plume of smoke as we were running. Mass hysteria, everybody was just running to get out of everybody else's way.
And then turned around and you can see 7 World Trade Center come down just right behind 140 West Street.
There was fire, there was smoke, there was a lot of ash and papers. It was like walking on the moon.
It was an incredible scene down there with dirt and debris and dust intermixed with hundreds and hundreds, maybe thousands of pieces of paper.
And it was so strange to see full sheets of paper while everything else was, reduced to small pieces of dust.
George and one of the other guys had gotten around to the loading dock, and that's when they saw number 7, which was piled all the way up.
You can imagine our building here, Washington Street here, the pedestrian walkway, and then World Trade Center 7, the 47-story building that caught on fire and collapsed. This building came down and collapsed on itself, and as the debris from the top came lower, it blew out like this, and the debris blew into the back of our building, literally punching the brickwork and the facades and the steel work and girders and everything into our building.
We have about 300,000 dial tone lines or equivalent dial tone lines that come out of that office, plus over 4 million data circuits that go through that office. About 20% of the traffic from the New York Stock Exchange goes through that area. So it's a major, major hub.
They served out of that office the following installations. One was the mayor's command center at 7 World Trade Center. They also served Police Plaza. They also served City Hall, and they served 26 Federal Plaza. Indeed, at 140 West Street, they also have the 911 switch.
Immediately after the event, we transferred all of that traffic to the alternate site. E911 was never lost for the city, which is a testament to the kind of work the teams do. So that was a success story among many others.
Our primary concern at this point is service, employees, customers. We are absolutely doing what we have to do to get this taken care of. In Pennsylvania, we are providing additional emergency circuits to wherever it is needed. The Pentagon continues to operate as close to normal as possible. Our switching equipment is still working. However, there are fires in the building. Our wireless folks in southern Manhattan lost about 10 cell sites. So far, we have put in 7 replacement cell sites in New York City and in New Jersey. We put an additional 2 in Washington, 1 outside of Pittsburgh. Verizon Wireless has made about 5,000 phones available to the different emergency organizations.
It became obvious once the shock of the tragedy hit that the next step was to say what's going to be the process for recovery. And what was pretty interesting is, I tell this story a lot, but we got a lot of very clear help from leadership in Washington and leadership in New York. And what was great about it, it was bipartisan and it was all the same. Help with the rescue, get the stock exchange back up and running, and then get rest of New York recovered.
So we rolled into action for the NYPD, the fire departments. At that time, the American Red Cross was coming online, FEMA. The Federal Bureau of Investigation had major requirements right away, and of course, the city of New York.
Basically, Pier 92 is where the mayor set up his Office of Emergency Management after the 9/11 attacks, where we put in 300 to 400 lines in a period of about 36 to 48 hours.
Our people in these kinds of crises are very instinctive. You don't have to give them a tremendous amount of instruction. They know what their job is, which is to provide service, to maintain service.
Our role becomes a role of communication, and once we had something to do, of course, we moved in and we did it. We called the wireless company, Verizon in this case, and made sure that we had mobile phones. We called the coin people, made sure we had coin trailers available to take out to the crash site.
We're on a war footing here. It's at least 12 to 16 hours a day for the network operations team, the buildings people, and national ops people, engineers. It's a full court press.
Bill Freeman, who runs the public communications group, immediately knew that people would be without service. So he immediately arranged for all of the public telephones in Manhattan to be activated on a free service basis.
First, we set up what we considered our command center for our customers so that they had 24-hour access to us.
We had individuals that on September 11th actually come up from the Philadelphia area with directional antennas to try and help find survivors in the rubble.
It was great how Verizon people just thought of these things spontaneously. There wasn't one command center that thought of everything that had to be done. Every department in Verizon knew what had to be done and came forward with whatever they thought would help in the crisis. And it was very easy as a communications person to simply communicate that.
We were overwhelmed with many agencies, whether it's government agencies, Red Cross, FEMA, asking for facilities at new locations. It was not uncommon to get a call to say, we need to put 700 employees and have 700 lines at this particular address tomorrow. Can you help us?
We had been told by the governor and by the mayor, Dick Grasso, who's the head of the stock exchange, and indeed the President of the United States, said that priority number one in response to this attack was to get the stock exchange back up and operating as quickly as possible.
They were talking about opening it on that Friday, if not by Monday at the latest. And we were trying to do an evaluation, is that even doable and what would that mean?
And sometime around Thursday, late morning, everyone said, Ivan, the date's Monday. It was no longer debatable.
After its longest closure in 70 years, the New York Stock Exchange was back in business today.
When you place an order on the New York Stock Exchange, that order also has to go over to have the price quotes verified through high-speed data circuits and back. A lot of those circuits ran through West Street. So in addition to bringing up the New York Stock Exchange building itself, we had to bring up this network that allowed for these price quotes to happen, and we had to bring up at least most of the major members of the New York Stock Exchange. And what that amounted to is between that Friday and Monday, where we knew we were going to have no choice but to open, we literally had to rebuild that network.
The data definitely would have taken 10 to 12 days to rebuild that manually, and it was determined that we really needed those servers with that data to be able to bring the stock market up and the stock exchange up on the following Monday.
And that equipment was located on the 23rd floor of 140 West Street.
The heroic part of this event, of course, was we had some employees who walked 23 flights of stairs in the dark.
I tell you, I never walked 23 flights, but you try to walk 23 flights.
The respirators were pretty tough to breathe through. We knew we were going to have to pack it up and remove it when we got up there, and that we were going to have to cart it all the way back down. So yeah, we took it slow and one step at a time.
They were in that building not knowing what was going to happen, going up there with flashlights, trying to find their way up there, find these servers in a pile of dust and rubble, and actually carried the servers down and took them to Pearl Street and made that network function by Monday morning. Most people probably don't know that we finished all that about 6 o'clock on Monday morning, so it was, I guess you'd say, a photo finish.
Verizon was there in spirit and in practice, and all of the wonderful men and women at Verizon have a lot to be proud of, because it couldn't have happened without the wonderful job they did on behalf of this country.
There was probably some element of relief watching that stock market open, but it was much more an overwhelming sense of pride in knowing what people had done.
The switch in the Pentagon was in danger.
The fire we observed through the night as it was making its way closer and closer to our operations center, therefore closer and closer to our 5E switch.
The fire marshal ordered all of our Verizon employees to evacuate from the building.
And they didn't realize the urgency that we were faced with in saving that switch from any sort of water or fire damage. They were pumping water into the building.
If in fact it would have gotten wet with it running, it would have been disastrous. They would have lost that switch. Our employees hung in there. They refused to leave the switch at that moment.
And those individuals on the fly and very quickly negotiated a way with the firefighters that we could protect the switch.
You know, we had a couple of people in there who were trying to keep the machine going, and we put tarps over it and all kinds of things as they were trying to pour water on this fire. And working with the federal government and our teams, we were able to keep service going through all of that.
And if you think of the consequences of losing the Pentagon, start to understand the magnitude of the efforts that our employees put forth. Because quite frankly, not only were we able to keep people connected, but we were able to keep our country running during that period. A period when we depended upon the people in that Pentagon to make the right decisions in running our country. And it took some valiant efforts on behalf of our employees to do just that.
At the end of the day, from a communications perspective, what made the difference was the relationship that we had been building over these days, months, and years with Verizon. And my heartfelt thanks to make sure that it was up and running goes out to Verizon.
Getting that 140 West Street back up in operation in the time that we did, I mean, it's nothing short of miraculous.
We just took it a step at a time. Once the fire department enabled us to get back into the building and we could take a look at it, we began to do the critical assessment of what the extent of the damage was, ensure that it was structurally sound, that people could work in the building, and then step by step go through the process of assessing the damage and figuring out how best to repair the damage and ensure that the equipment could be turned up as quickly as possible and that the building could be safed off for people to work in it.
We were planning to go to 140 in the morning, which is the 12th of September.
We had a crew waiting on the sidewalks to get in and try to figure out ways to get power up and to start cleaning up the building.
We had no water, no electricity. Everything was covered in dirt, debris.
Water was just flowing into the basement, and the stairwell going down to the basement looked like Niagara Falls. I mean, it was just this roaring sound of water headed down into the basement.
But we got a crew together, we went in, and then it just rolled.
Getting power to the switch, the initial drive to get power to the switch off which everything else would grow from, that was job one. And again, the environment we were in, everything was on fire around us. You didn't know if the buildings were stable. But once we were able to get some lighting in the building and get some power up to their power rooms, then we were able to develop more of a plan.
I mean, I felt that the building is telling us, let's go, get everything back together, because I seen it right there. No matter, I mean, buildings all around it being affected, and it's still there.
You don't see buildings like this anymore. And it withstood an assault that most buildings have. In fact, we're the first building standing after the ground zero area. It's a tribute to the way this building was built.
We've seen hurricanes, and we've seen ice storms, and we've seen fires in buildings, but this was a combination of all of those events happening in one location. And so it was something that we had never seen in our careers before, but we knew what had to be done.
Many people that I talked to would have wanted to pick up an M16 and go to war, but that was not to be for us. I think what the team understood was that the battle was going to be in West Street, and the way we would fight back would be to bring West Street back quickly, restore service to customers.
I think there's a feeling that we're not going to just sit back and let this happen to us. We're going to do something about it. And one of the things we do about it as telephone people is to restore service as quickly as possible.
Now, the people on the outside looking at the loop, they're going through a variety of different records, literally cable pair by cable pair, and they're feeding that information out to the plant people to be able to tell them what to splice, with the idea that we're going to be able to get around the rubble and ultimately get a good connection to a customer, pair by pair by pair. And that's essentially the bypass strategy that we've been deploying since day one.
Today we're adding additional support to the cables that are run out the windows of the building.
We've got about 30,000 pair of copper coming out the 8th floor, the 5th floor, and we're going to bring some out the 1st floor as well. What we want to do is splice that copper into manholes that are up on the eastern portion of this to bypass the cables that have been damaged by water.
So from certain manhole locations, they've been spliced in to good cable, and then they extend to the customer to provide dial tone.
It took thousands of our people working around the clock, using all the intellectual capital that they ever accumulated and all the years' experience that they had, working together in a fashion that is totally unbelievable to bring off what I consider probably the telecommunications miracle in the last century.
Callers started to flood phone lines minutes after the telethon began.
Hollywood unites for an unprecedented telethon.
Phones ringing off the hook at call centers around the country.
You've already seen the stars on stage. These are the other stars, the ones who are working the phones, the volunteers from Verizon.
We were called to ask if we could make available between 4,000 and 5,000 people to man phones and take the pledges being made across the country.
We had, I think it was 14 minutes after we asked for volunteers to man the phones on that telephone, we were filled up.
We can't really all rush down to New York and help restore our service, so this is something that we could do, and all the employees just rushed to volunteer.
And whatever we can do to do our part, we're going to do it.
So we had call centers in California, we had call centers in Dallas, we had call centers in New England who were just loaded with volunteers who came in that evening and answered phones and took pledges.
Thank you for calling Verizon, a proud sponsor of the United Way and the New York Communities Trust.
Our people have a sense of pride and a sense of commitment. They understand the goal, the purpose of this company, and they understand our values. Our values are integrity, respect, imagination, and passion. All those four are surrounded by service. Service to our customers, service to our communities, and service to each other.
It feels good to know that we were able to come together as a company and to make these donations on behalf of all of us. Collectively, with our retirees and our active employees, that we were able to help raise and donate over $16 million immediately to these organizations that are on the ground. I mean, they are at ground zero. They're feeding all the rescue workers. They're housing the rescue workers. They are clothing the rescue workers.
We have been going around giving updates to area businesses and residents of the various housing authority complexes, giving them updates on what the situation is with the phone service.
We're telling them where they can pick up free wireless telephones. We're telling them where all of the public telephones, what street corners they're on, how long they can stay on the phone for free. So yeah, we think we're doing our bit.
We partnered with the Verizon wireless team on developing a cellular phone for our business and residential customers. And we did that, and we started to distribute these phones at the New York City Business Recovery Center at 110 Maiden Lane.
Over the course of 3 weeks, we distributed to both business and residences approximately 5,000 phones.
Within a matter of days, we had employee assistance programs available to employees. We had counselors on site at certain locations where employees had been relocated to so they could talk with these grief counselors. We had hotlines set up for people to call in.
Well, it makes you feel proud to be part of that kind of a team, which cares about the community we live in and cares about helping our society the way they do.
We have a 1926 landmark building that's there that was intended to be a fixture in the southern Manhattan skyline when it was built. We're obligated to restore it to its original aesthetic qualities, which we are fully positioned to do, and we certainly know how to do it. And then within that exterior skin of the building, we're going to build one of the most high-tech telephone buildings in the country.
It's incredible now to walk through because now we've rebuilt. It's beautiful. So you have a lot of pride, a lot of pride.
If you look at this entire recovery, this 1 week process, we did more things in that week than any company could have ever achieved, probably in years. We rebuilt a network that was probably the size of the city of Cincinnati in 4 days. We put back over 4 million data circuits, over 300,000 dialed tone lines. We put back probably the most important financial symbol in the entire world, and we did it in 4, 5, or 6 days.
Here in the Big Apple, where the reputation that New Yorkers have, hard edge to them, tough, don't speak to you in the streets and so on. I saw people applaud Verizon employees wearing hard hats when they would walk by on the street, knowing what they were doing. It's just incredible.
The people on Ground Zero or near Ground Zero or dislocated because of Ground Zero have paid a personal price and a hardship. But they are supported by the rest of the Verizon family, all 260,000 people. And those people are all over the United States, from Hawaii to California to Texas to Maine to Florida. These people stand ready.
One of the greatest tests ever put on a telecommunications company. Stood tall. I hope they will remember that, because I think we did. And I think we're the best in the business.
The people involved were so typical of our employees. They're proud and they're involved and they care, and they made a lot of friends during their career. So I think what we need to do is we need to carry on and make sure that we never lose that sight of what they stood for, because these were just people who got up every day and they grinded out, and they represented their families and themselves and this company in a way that we have to make sure that we keep that spirit alive for them.